Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage The Vault Series. Today's clip was shot back in 2004. We went over to the Nashville Musicians Union building and met with President Harold Bradley. Harold, best known as Owen and Harold Bradley, kind of created the music industry here in Nashville. Harold was also one of the original Nashville session musicians and one of the most recorded session musicians of all time. And his brother Owen was probably the most revered record producer here in Nashville ever. They bought this house on 16th Avenue, and they went into the basement and they cut the ceiling out to give it some height to make it a good sounding room. And a lot of hits were cut in that room. And then they built a Quonset Hut, which, if you don't know what that is, it's like an old style metal building. It's like a half circle. They're very easy to put together and put up, and very inexpensive. If you've ever seen Gomer Pyle, that's the barracks that they live in. And so that was intended to be a film studio, and it was. But later they found out that the sound in there was better than what they had in the little studio under the house. And so they ceased doing the filming, and there's a secret to why it became that great sounding room, and it's quite by accident. Hope you like it. If you do, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. Once again, the late great session musician and co-founder of Music Row, Harold Bradley.
Paul Coyne, who was the first record producer that came to Nashville, and he and Owen were great friends, and he told Owen, he says, well, I'm going to leave and go to Jim Beck's studio in Dallas. And at that time, Owen was the leader of, one of the leaders, three leaders of WSM big band. He had his dance band that I was playing in, and we were making a few records, and he didn't want to just pull up and leave Nashville, so he said, well, listen, he said, Harold and I have had 2 studios, and why don't you let us build you one? If you like it, then I won't have to move, and you won't have to leave. And he said, I'll put up $15,000, and you put up $15,000, and Harold continued to give his time for free. And so that was the deal, except Paul Coyne never came up with this $15,000. Owen borrowed the $15,000 on his life insurance. But we did make the move. Owen and a real estate man drove all the way out to 16th Avenue, and Owen, they got out past Belmont College, and Owen said, let's go back to that first place. So we went back and we bought a building. And then we decided to put a Quonset Hut on the back of the building. So Joe Crane built us a Quonset Hut on the back of the building that we bought.
So the building you bought, was that a house or a commercial building?
It was a house. Yeah, actually we threw away the columns. Some people later wanted, I'm sorry we threw them away because maybe somebody could have used them. But Owen knocked out the middle floor, and so we had started in the basement, and it was a high ceiling, but it was small. But in that studio, Young Love was cut, Bebop-A-Lulu was cut, Singing the Blues, You Can Make It If You Try, Gene Allison, and I think we did Jingle Bell Rock there with Bobby Helms in that small studio. And we did The Last Letter with Jack Green when he was in Ernest's band, and that was the song that got him out of Ernest Tubbs' band. And so we had the Quonset Hut, which was going to be our film studio. But when we started adding the Anita Kerr Singers or the Jordanaires and Boots Randolph, and then the drummers playing louder than usual, and the small room didn't suit for anything but real kind of hard country. So we moved up and started recording in the Quonset Hut. And
what'd you do with the other building?
Well, we still used it. We used both of them as recording studios. We had the small one and we had the large one. And Owen and Mort Thomason, the engineer, there was a toilet downstairs, and they tore all of that out and made a small room and plastered it, and they put a microphone and a speaker in, and that was our echo chamber. Didn't have echo on records back then.
Mm-hmm.
So
how did they know to do that?
I don't know. I really don't know.
So
because in 1953 and 54 and 55, I recorded with Ray Anthony live on the stage of the Ryman Auditorium. He liked to record there because of the echo there, because you couldn't artificially induce echo, and it had such a great echo there.
So now, for those who don't know, the way the echo chamber works is you has a speaker in one side, a microphone picking it up in the other side, correct?
Yeah.
So that was the first echo chamber built in Nashville then.
I can't really say that. Somebody might have built it earlier because I think RCA had some studio.
But this was before that though, right?
Well, it was before Chet came out, before RCAB, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they were over at TRAFCO, the Methodist Film and Radio Commission. It seemed like they had a studio over there, and I thought that their echo chamber was like a big concrete tube. Went all the way through the building though, and so if one of the secretaries used the restroom, well, that ruined your echo.
Or it could improve it.
It wasn't too smart. So I really can't say that it was the first one, but you know, it was probably the first room, the first one that was built like that.
So this is a very historic here, because that most people say that really the Quonset Hut is the studio that really kicked off the music industry here in Nashville.
Well, yeah, but that particular echo chamber was in the small studio, and we may have still connected it up when we went to the Quonset Hut, because it might have been the only thing we had. Eventually, we had the German big long plates for the echo, but we very well could have used it back there. And I left off a good one that was cut in the small studio, Gone, by Ferlin Husky,
yeah.
which is supposed to have been like the first kind of rock or rockabilly or rock record, you know.
So, I would like to go back to the Quonset Hut just for a second. The actual building, how was that a building that they shipped in, and was it an old Quonset Hut that the Army had, or was it a new building, or what?
Oh, it was a new building. Joe Crane, whose son played with Charlie Daniels later on. But it was Joe Crane that built it, and it was all new. But it had a couple of problems. One of them was that it had a tile floor, and it was really a ping in there. And there was another problem that the rain, when it would rain, would have to stop. So we spent $500 in green burlap for the ceiling. And that cured that problem, and the way we cured the ping was an accident, because we rented the studios to Al Ganaway to do the Grand Ole Opry movies. And so he asked to build a barn set in there. So he put wood all along the sides, and down to the very end he had the opening of a barn door, but it was all wood. And what it did, it was magic. It evened out the sound, and we never took the wood out.
Was that wood that was on the ceiling part of his doing, or was that added, the slats that were on the ceiling up there?
Well, I think we did those, but his was over on the side, so that when they shot it, would make it appear like you were inside the barn.
How did you attach the burlap?
I don't know. I remember the carpenters getting up there, and I guess they nailed it up or stapled it up or whatever they did to the ceiling.
Okay, so it kind of just hung loosely or something, or was it glued to the ceiling?
They attached it pretty firmly up in the very ceiling up there. And before that, Mort and my brother had experimented in the small studio, because they found out that the bass travels around, and so you put a big curtain in the corners and trap the sound to keep it from going all the way around. So they were doing it by ear, you know, and that's an awful good way to do it, because when RCA was at TRAFCO, they hired Tin Whistle Charlie, one of their guys, you know, at that time probably $30,000 a year to come in, and he would blow his whistle, and then he would look at his watch, and then that's when I found out what decay was. He waited to see how long the decay was, or the echo was, you know, and it was just a terrible studio. The bass just rumbled around in there. So, you know, these were supposedly engineers, but they didn't get that one right at all.
Well, everybody that we've interviewed that's played here in Nashville, we ask, what's your favorite studio? And just hands down, every single one of them,
Studio B? I said, why? I said, I don't know. It just had a certain feel, a warmth to it. They were talking about using it when they didn't even need headphones.
Oh, we didn't use headphones. That's why some of us still have some hearing, because we didn't use them until later on. But I've thought about it too, and I'll tell you, George Gibbs recorded there one day, and I walked by her, getting ready to go by her to go into the control room, and she says, "Well, I see why everybody wants to record here." And I was very interested, so I said, "Well, why is that?" She said, "Because everything sounds so good to you."
Mm-hmm.
And it did, because your instrument sounded really good to you, and we weren't wearing headphones when we did Patsy Cline. We didn't use headphones for many, many years. We didn't have the capability, so we had to hear each other, and that was what was good, that we could be a long ways away from each other, but yet we could hear each other to play together and stay together very well. In other words, your voice sounded good to you, and your instrument sounded good to you, and you could play together like a band, you know.
We could thank you for the Quonset Hut, you and Owen, then, for sure.
Well, I'd give Owen more credit, because he was the guy that, we'd buy a studio or something like that, and he'd go in and he'd say, "Well, I'm going to knock that wall down." He's a lot like you, Joe. "I'm going to knock that wall down over there." And I'd say, "Well, fine," because all I want to do is play the guitar. I didn't want to invent a guitar like Chet or do any of that stuff. If I liked the guitar and amp, then I want to just plug it in and play it. Not analyze it, but Owen, "Well, I'm knock that wall down." Then great, go ahead, I'll help you pay for it.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me finish this then. On the Quonset Hut, let's take it up to when Owen sold it.
1962.
62. And so, what did you guys do then? Where did you go?
Well, for 2 years we weren't allowed to go back in the studio business, and I didn't want to go back in the studio business because it owned us. We didn't own it.
Mm-hmm.
We finally, I used to type all the invoices, and then finally we hired my sister as a secretary. So I would still have to make estimates on films if we were going to do them, and commercials, and just be responsible for the studio and playing early morning television, playing dance jobs on the weekend, playing whatever sessions I could. So it got to be where it owned us instead of us owning it, And so I didn't really get back in the studio business. My brother eventually built the Bradley's barn with he and his son, because he wanted to have something for his son to do, and also it was only like 5 or 6 miles down the road from him.
His son being?
Jerry Bradley.
Jerry Bradley.
Yeah. And so basically I've never gone back in the studio business since then. I think somebody in New York made the decision that to make it into offices, even though it was profitable. The studio, from what I understand, was profitable, and I understood that Billy Shore would have bought it if they'd have sold it.
Well, I was working there then,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not sure exactly, to be honest, about it, who really pulled the trigger on it. I know that the person in charge of CBS at that time was Rick Blackburn here locally.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if it was him or not really that made the call on that, but they were renting offices over the four-star building on 17th.
Yeah.
And they figured that I know that one of the reasons was that the engineers were all union, and technology had changed, and you really didn't need backup engineers anymore to press the start button on a 2-inch machine anymore. So. That was one of the things, and they figured if they could condense all of their offices under one roof, and since so many people were using outside studios, that they figured that made sense.
And I go back to what you said about doing it all at once in a big studio, because the records I'm hearing, I don't knock their commercial success, but I don't hear any air on them, because there's not any. Mostly everything's kind of plugged directly into the board.
Mm-hmm.
And there was air on those other records. It was an ambience that you could kind of feel,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel that on the records anymore, and I don't think that's a good thing. And
Well,
you're right about feeding off each other. When we had all of us in one room, instead of going in and doing a rhythm track like they do now, and then call a steel guitar, electric guitar player in to save it or put it in a direction, or a keyboard player or fiddle, we had to do it all at once, and we had to do it all in 3 hours. It was an entirely different world.